Hi everyone. Welcome to week 2 of online learning. Technically, this is our 9th lab together. So this week we're going to be talking a little bit about how to write the results section, or kind of what goes into it, because that's sort of the next big thing on the docket. And we're going to be talking a little bit about how to format tables and figures in APA, because that's just sort of another way to represent your data. Really quickly, just want to touch base about some things that are due in the near future. So first off, everyone should be aware, hopefully, that on Friday, that's April 3rd, you need to send me your individual SPSS output file. So again, this is an individual assignment. I think I've checked in with everyone now about accessing SPSS. So in that output file, that's the .spv file, you should have your scale reliabilities, your Chromback alphas in there if you haven't already sent them to me, and if you have any scales in your group project. Any sort of descriptive statistics for your variables, so those would be things like means, standard deviations. If it's a categorical variable, you're going to want your frequencies. And then, however, you're testing your hypotheses, whether it's with correlations or t-tests or ANOVAs, whatever we talked about in our group meeting. And then the following Friday, on the 10th, as a group, your results section is due. So this is sort of the last group writing project. And with that, of course, you'll need to submit your group self-assessment sheet. Okay, so what actually goes into the results section? So the whole point of the results section is that this is where you're really talking about what you found, right? This is kind of the big ta-da of all of your hard work. But the point is that you still need to make it really organized for your reader, right? So you want to make sure that you're talking about your results in the order that you listed your hypotheses in the introduction. Everything should sort of follow that map that you laid out of the order of your hypotheses. The results section is not the place to talk about any kind of broader implications for the results. You don't want to say why these results are important or what they mean beyond the scope of your study. All of that's going to be saved for the discussion section, which we'll talk about probably next week. But all you're doing in the results section is that you're simply presenting information. And this is just information that your reader can use to make their own judgments, right? So all you're doing is you're just giving your reader information, you're letting them sort of sift through it and make their own conclusions from it. So you can certainly say things like, we found a positive correlation, which means that as temperature sales went up, so did ice cream sales. That's fine. But you don't want to talk about the implications of that. So you don't want to go on to say something like, and therefore, ice cream shops should consider having longer hours in the summer, right? Like that doesn't need to be in your results section. That can be in the discussion section. Okay, hopefully that's clear. If not, definitely chat with me. Okay, so when it comes to reporting your analyses in text, the first thing you want to do is you want to talk about what analyses you actually ran, right? And then you're going to talk about if it was or was not significant. And just remember here, just a note about language. You can say that something was not significant. You can say that an effect was non-significant, but we don't say that anything is insignificant, because insignificant is about the size of an effect, like something being larger or smaller. If something's really small, it's insignificant. Whereas when we're talking about statistics, it's not significant or non-significant. So just as a language point there. You're going to report the relevant statistics. And we'll talk about all of these points more later, but just to kind of introduce it here, you may want to consider using a table for when you're talking about a lot of numbers, right? So if you're talking about demographics or means and standard deviations, something that is just going to fill your results section with tons of dense numbers that's going to make it hard to read, you may want to just sort of put that all in a table for your reader instead, just for readability. Okay, so let's go through all of these things one by one. So, talking about stating the analyses that you ran. So, of course, if you're doing a correlation, you're going to say that you did a Pearson's correlation because that's the kind that we're talking about. If you did a t-test, you're going to specify whether it was a repeated subjects t-test or within subjects t-test, or there was an independent t-test that was between subjects. So are you testing the same people twice, or are you testing different people? And then if you're doing an ANOVA, you need to specify if it's a one-way ANOVA or if it's a factorial ANOVA. And again, these are things that we talked about in our meetings last week. But again, if you wanted to sort of touch base with me, I'm available to do that. And then you're going to talk about, was it significant? So again, remember, we're always looking for that p less than 0.05 in psychology. So if you do have a significant test, then that's great. Like, pop the balloons, right? You can say something like, a significant effect of your IV on the DV was found, or there was a significant relationship between your variables. Just as a reminder, you don't want to say that you proved something or that you proved there was a relationship. Remember, we really don't like that P word in science. Our statistics don't prove things, they support things. Okay, if you don't find a significant relationship, that's totally fine. Remember, the whole purpose of this course and these projects is essentially like the training wheels to get you to move on to sort of graduate level research, if that's the direction that you want to go in. So, there's a lot of constraints in this class. So if you don't get a significant effect, totally fine. What you're going to say in that case is something like, there was no significant effect of your IV on your DV, or the relationship between IV and DV was not found to be significant. Something like that. Okay, so when it comes to reporting the statistics, you want to make sure a couple things. First of all, make sure that all statistical notation is italicized, right? So your F's are italicized, your P's are italicized, your T's, anything that involves statistics, your D's, your partial eta squareds, whatever it might be, those are all in italics. You also need to make sure that you have spaces on either side of your mathematical symbols. So if you notice in the example just at the top there, when I'm saying that there's a significant effective dose, you notice that there's spaces around those equal signs. So make sure that there's, you give those equal signs, those less than signs, those greater than signs, give them a little space to breathe, give them some spaces there. And it's really important that you always report exact p-values. You don't want to just say that something was less than 0.05 or greater than 0.05. You want to actually give what SPSS prints out for you. The exception to this is if you're referring to more than one p-value at once. So let's say you're talking about multiple non-significant effects, then you might say something like all p were greater than 0.05. But again, that's only for reporting to more than one test together at once. Otherwise, give the exact p-value. And of course, just a reminder, SPSS is not good at printing very, very small p-values. So if you ever get a p-value of 0 in SPSS, it's actually less than 0.001. Okay. So let's go on to talk about how to do tables and figures in SPSS, or I should say for your papers. So your tables, any kind of tables you do are completely optional. You definitely do not want to just copy and paste anything from your SPSS output, any kind of tables or any kind of graphs, and just put them into your paper. They're not APA format. They're not particularly pretty. They're kind of dense. They have a lot of information that you don't necessarily need. So definitely do not copy and paste anything from your SPSS output directly into your results section and call it a table or call it a figure. if you're going to put together a table, you have to at least reference the table in the text, but you don't have to actually present those numbers in the text. In fact, the whole point of using a table is so that you don't have to busy your text with numbers. So, for example, I might say that post hoc analyses revealed that individuals who received the placebo had significantly higher blood pressure than the individuals who received the high dose and low dose of high blocks, but there was no significant difference between individuals who received the high versus the low dose. See Table 1. So normally here, I would have to be putting a whole bunch of parentheses of means and standard deviations next to all of the different dose levels. But instead, if you just put see Table 1, then you can put that all in a table and your reader can just reference it when they're ready to, as opposed to trying to sort of read the substance of the sentence while kind of trying to skim through or wade through the means and standard deviations at the same time. For graphs, you are required to have at least one graph in your paper. At least one. You can have more than one. You can have a graph in a table, that kind of thing. It's all totally fine, but you have to have at least one graph showing some kind of results. So once again, don't just copy the ones from SPSS. They're not APA formatted. You can make better ones on your own. They're not particularly nice looking from SPSS. It's really, I would recommend using Excel to make graphs. If you're not familiar with Excel, I know that sometimes feels very intimidating, but there is a whole document on Husky CT in the writing resources folder just on how to create different kinds of graphs in Excel. So go check that out. So graphs are typically used to show significant effects or even interactions. So if you have a significant effect, that would be the one to make a figure for or a graph for. And again, like tables, you want to make sure that you refer to the graph at some point in the text. So if you're discussing the effect, like there was a significant effect of condition on self-esteem, then you might want to put see figure 1 in parentheses, just as a place to refer your reader to go check that out and just actually go see the result for themselves. I mean, visually see it in a graph. Okay, so here's an example of a descriptive statistic table. I'll just sort of briefly go through it. The things I just want to note, because you can obviously look through these slides later, is every table needs some kind of a title. And then you can see here that they have their independent variables sort of across the top, making the columns, the dependent variables in the rows, and then of course the means and the standard deviations in the substance of the table. So this is just a really nicely organized APA style table. You can also use tables to organize, for example, like ANOVA outputs and things like that. You know, for example, if you have a factorial ANOVA, sometimes it's nice to put all of your F values and your P values into one table. So it kind of depends on the needs of your group. And again, I'm happy to talk about that kind of thing with each of you individually. And please do check out How to Report Statistics in APA. That's a downloadable file on Husky CT in the APA resources. Here's just a correlation table. This isn't actually APA formatted in terms of how the table looks, but this just sort of gives you an idea of like what a correlation table generally looks like, and how to put sort of the stars in to indicate significance and things like that. Okay, so for graphs, generally you want to use bar graphs, which is what this one is here, to show any sort of difference between means. So if you have two groups or two conditions, a bar graph would be the one you want to use. And if you have a correlation, you typically want to use a scatter plot. Again, explanations for how to make both of those is on Husky CT under the writing resources, the how to create graphs in Excel file. Even with a figure, you want to make sure that you're including a title, some kind of a legend to explain what your sort of different colors are, your different groups are. You want to make sure to label your axes. And if you have a bar chart, you make sure to include your error bars. The error bars are sort of those up and down bars on each group there. So you can see the in-group and the out-group, the big yellow bars, the big yellow blocks there. They have the black vertical bars on them. Those are error bars. So you definitely want to make sure to include those as well. So resources to get you started on all this. For the results section, there's a bunch of handouts on Husky CT in the APA resources folder as well as in the writing resources folder. You can also look at results sections of other papers that you're citing in your own document. Those are really good to look at for examples, especially for things like tables and graphs and how to reference them in text, things like that. And of course, you can come back to this PowerPoint. For how to do sort of data analysis, please do go back and look at the SPSS exercises that we've done. So on correlations, on t-tests, on the different kinds of ANOVAs, those will give you sort of point-by-point directions of where to click in SPSS and how to report the statistics. And then, of course, always, you can come to my virtual office hours, or we can set up a time to talk. Those are probably better than email, just because, again, we can share screens at that point, and that's a lot easier to talk about statistics when we can sort of both be looking at the same thing than trying to explain over email what's going on. And so, as always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Do feel free to post it to the discussion thread on Husky CT, the FAQ one, so that other people can see the answer to your question as well. And then come chat with me Wednesday afternoons or any other time as well. I hope you all are staying well, and yeah, I will talk to you later. All right, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Thanks, everyone. Bye.